Hey everyone, it's Chuck. Finally, doing this brisket video, part of my series with Mill Skill. I'll be doing a good amount of videos on the 94 gallon coming up, so keep an eye out on the Jerby channel or the Mill Skill channel. Alright, this brisket. I got this brisket at HEB, my local HEB. What I was looking for in the brisket at the store, I wanted to make sure that the brisket had a good amount of fat on top. And alright, for trimming, the first thing I do is you open the brisket upside down basically, and you cut off that piece that I just cut off 3 seconds ago. And that's basically all I do there. And then I turn it around and I go straight into the mohawk. That's the second step. Go straight into the mohawk. Cut straight down just like that. Put the brisket towards you. And yep. And then so I angle the knife this way. This helps so much. Not necessarily the precision. You kind of do want to be squatting down and facing the brisket itself, but I was just doing these weird angles for to get the best camera angle. But yeah. And right now I'm shaping the brisket, shaping the lean. Basically just want like a little curve, taking down a little bit of fat. Yeah, looks good to me. And then I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side of the lean and just cut straight down if you want, or you can also actually within that same cut just like straight down and curve it. But I don't like to do it the same time, so I do it differently. And same thing, just curve it up. You just want your brisket to be curvy. And that is, what do y'all call it? Aerodynamic? You want the brisket to be aerodynamic. And then you're basically just gonna pinch the brisket all around and trim all of that fat, all of the fat that you want out. I like to keep the brisket with like a quarter of an inch of fat on. Y'all can do more, y'all can do less, whatever y'all like. But too much fat is something that is so yeah. And you can do like a little slit. Don't get scared. Just so that you can check and see how much more fat you need to cut out, because sometimes it may not seem like it, but it is a lot. And yeah. And for those cuts right there on the point, I do like to face it on the other side, and I find it easier to cut it like that. But yeah, so I'm going to be repeating these same steps over and over. It's going to be the same hand movements, same cuts. And I'm just checking all over, see that making sure that it has the fat that I want on it. And so the point end of the brisket, you want that to be curvy. You want that to be like a little circle-y, like a sphere end. And so basically just trim down, or trim curvy, if that makes any sense. You're just you're trimming, and if you're going down a circle or something like that. Yeah. So yeah, I'm doing the same steps over and over. And meanwhile, I do these redundant steps that are very, very, very necessary if you want a perfect trim brisket. I'll talk about me for those of you who don't know me. My name's Chuck, or alias bbqrat on Instagram. I've worked at 5 barbecue places so far. I started at Franklin's in Austin about 4 years. I went there while I was going to UT Austin, and then I worked at way down south in Oslo, Norway. Norway was awesome. I recommend y'all check it out if you can. I worked in Egypt at Longhorn, Texas BBQ. I worked there with Johnny and Max Texicana Barbecue. It was a very wild experience. I worked at Zavala's Barbecue in Grand Prairie. Um, I worked there for like a couple of months, but I still learned so much. Everyone over there is amazing. I recommend. And right now I'm currently at Goldie's. I've been at Goldie's for about a year or so. I started kind of like in the beginning ish of the pandemic. Um, and yeah, now I just cook over there. And I'm planning to open my own spot called Barb's BQ, in Lockhart soon. We'll see. But yeah, so let's get back into it. So if y'all saw, I did like literally the same things over and over again. So it's really up to you guys. Like, what do you want your brisket to look like? You can just like continue shaping it. It's literally an art. It is honestly so peaceful. I really enjoy trimming briskets when it's only like a small amount, of course. Because now at the restaurant we trim like, I don't know, like 150 to 200 a week, and all in one day, and it's pretty wild. Yeah, that was my finished product. I feel really good about it. Okay, so I recorded myself doing the fire, starting it, and then it ended up being that I didn't press record, of course. But basically, it's just a bag of Kingsford, I guess, and 2 pieces of wood, and those little like fire starter packets. I did start the fire before putting the brisket on. It was cold outside, and I just wanted to take a break from the brisket itself, so I just did that ahead of time. Got it rolling because I knew I wasn't gonna get too crazy before I put it on my brisket. So now I'm gonna season, and yeah, I'm just doing pepper and salt on the back side. And my salt, I mix it with a little bit of chicken bouillon just to see what's up with that. Yeah, little bit of pepper, a little bit of chicken bouillon and salt. For my what's it called, the binder, I use jalapeno juice. That's what was around, but you can use anything: hot sauce, water, mustard, anything you want. This brand of jalapenos is the best in my opinion. So yeah. Pepper. I don't have a shaker, so I'm doing all of this with my hand. And so I'm just shaking it on. I want a really good solid coverage of pepper. The pepper is 16 mesh. It's what we use at the restaurant, I believe. You can use all types of pepper. I would say, I mean, the finer it is, the harder it is to, I don't know, keep control of, maybe. But yeah, you just want to shower it on. Pepper definitely helps a lot with the bark, so you want a good amount on the brisket. Oh gosh, working in Kennedale and Goldie's, it gets to you. Seasoning this brisket with pepper does take me a while. Having a shaker definitely helps, but it does feel a little bit more intimate with the hand. You know, you're literally like every single particle is going specifically to where you are dropping it, so it's special in a way. This seasoning, it's basically like Laurie's. I would say it's the Fiesta. The Fiesta, for those of you who are not in Texas, Fiesta is our like a grocery store, and it's basically their seasoning salt, and I mix it with El Venado's seasoning. I think it's just like their original seasoning, and it comes out really tasty. Like Both of those together are very flavorful. I really enjoy them. But you can do anything. I mix it up all the time, or at least at the restaurant, we mix it up all the time, really. We're just like, oh, we'll do this next time, like, we'll change it up. And it's fun because it's just, you're literally making like a 12 to 14 hour process. It's just like, there's so many things that you can do with it. Okay, so yeah, pat on those sides, and yeah, that's my final work. I was very proud. It looks super beautiful. My son, so pretty. Oh yeah, and lastly, I forgot to talk about it, but I showered it with a little bit of salt and chicken bouillon on top. You don't have to do that if you like season heavy with the Lawry's or whatever seasoning salt that you use. Um, and yeah, when you're putting it on the smoker, you do want to shape it up a bit, like make sure it's all feeling aerodynamic. And all right, so I put a piece of wood there, just I don't know, whatever, and I put a water pan, small little muffin cake pan, I guess. And the fire that I built in the beginning is pretty smoky. I have the damper fully open right now because it is cold outside, so I just want to get some flow going. But I did close it halfway, I would say. I think it's halfway. And I'm aiming for 250. Alrighty, now that that's all in there, I'm gonna take care of what was left over, which was the fat and the meat scrap. The fat I was setting aside. All of this I was setting aside as I was trimming. And basically the fat is your tallows. So I put that in a cake pan and I wrapped it in foil and I put it in the smoker. And that is basically going to be rendered and ready to use by the time my brisket is all done. And yeah, I think that was like maybe like 10 minutes in. This is about an hour in. It's looking like it got a good amount of smoke already. It's turning, the color's changing. Yeah, everything's looking good. My fire, pretty simple. I think it was like 2 bottom, 2 on top. It's very low and slow. That's what you want. And yeah, and it's I'm doing 250 for about 2.5 to 3 hours. I would say I'd recommend maybe 2 hours, or I don't know, do whatever you want, honestly. Like, I feel like it's almost impossible to cook a bad brisket in the smoker. Like, honestly, like, I really didn't do anything to this brisket, as you'll see, because my cook videos, or like the brisket cook video, is very short. The damper is still at the same spot, and then yeah, 3 hours later, or 2.5 hours later at 250, I went to 275 for about 3 hours. And I don't know, Johnny had that lying around, so I just used that as my shovel. I believe this is about 3 to 4 hours into the cook, and it's looking so nice. Like, that's my son. And all right, the last 2 hours of my cook, I went to 300, and I did a no wrap brisket because, I mean, it just looks so good. Like, it felt really soft all around, and the bark was looking super good, and there was no need for a wrap, so I just left it on like that. So this is the brisket 8 hours in, and it's ready to pull. One thing about the smoker is that the brisket cook is so much shorter. But yeah, 8 hours into the cook, and it's ready. It was in the high 190s, and basically what you're looking for is like, when you want to hold it, like kind of like grabbing it by the lean, and with your middle fingers you want to touch it from the bottom, and you want to see if it feels broken down. And I left it a little tighter because I am gonna carry it over for the next day because it's gonna rest overnight. And this is what you want. You want the fat. That was a fat chick right there. The fat right there, it looked brown, it looked caramelly. it looked delicious. That's what you want. That's literally like just like what you want of cooking any type of meat. You just really want to render that fat because it just releases so much flavor, and it's just like happiness. And also it feels like really, really great when you achieve that because it is hard. I would recommend, well, I'll talk about like what I learned from this cook later in the video. But yeah, I'm wrapping it. You get two pieces of butcher paper. I just like pull it towards you, make sure it's all tight in there, and then flippity flop. And squishy the edges, shape it. And now I'm gonna use the tallow that we put there in the beginning. I'm gonna use it to heat up the pink Yeti. This tallow is really hot. It's literally just came out of smoker and it's burning hot. I'm just gonna pour only the juice into the Yeti, and that's what I'm gonna use to heat up the Yeti, and I'm gonna rest the brisket in the Yeti. If you don't have a warmer, this is what ideally you would do. You want to rest the brisket in the Yeti. It works. It works good. And yeah, there it goes. Yep. Good night. And that was it. Alrighty, the next morning, I pulled brisket out of the Yeti, and it was in the high 130s. Ideally, you would want to cut into the brisket at 140. The Yeti held up really well, like it carried over nice. The brisket rested very nicely in the Yeti, like it was still nice and warm in there. And I have some tallow there, because I am going to shower it with tallow in a second. And yeah, look at our product. It looks pretty nice. Look at that bark, like it's all around just like gold. So basically you want to touch it all around, see how soft it is. If there are any crunchy parts, you want to feel it underneath the lean and see if it feels broken down, and it certainly did. That's my son right there, Topolino, little rat. Yeah, it looks pretty good. It's a good cook. And I just keep feeling it around because it's so soft, and so like having the fat rendered really well and the softness of the brisket is like such a big accomplishment. Like it's a huge pat on the back. Like it's amazing. Like you did that. I got this thing at HEB. It just looks so hardcore. I had to have it. And yeah, I put some tallow on top. Yep, shininess. For tallow, I am used to be a tallow hater, but tallow is our friend. Like tallow really does retain the brisket really well. Like when you slice it, it retains it so it doesn't oxidize that fast. Tallow softens up the brisket too. It's good. It's our friend. So cutting this brisket, I was really nervous actually. Nervous throughout the whole cook, honestly. Like just, it was weird filming myself. But it's good, you know, it's just I love being uncomfortable in a way where I'm just doing something new. And so I'm showing all this lean. The fat looks really nice. The lean just like, it just looks really good. Everything looked really good about it. But my cutting skills look horrible in this video. I would say to watch Derby's cutting videos instead, because this is not. Truthfully, I was in shock. I literally forgot how to barbecue. These are the burn ends. Looks really nice. Here's another example of me forgetting how to cut. So like normally cutting the burn ends, it's like a 2-step process. Like you just cut the fat out and then you do the burn ends, but I somehow made it into like a 4-step. I was nervous. And all right, first try. I'm trying this burn end, and I'm like tasting it like I'm wine tasting. I want to get the flavor of everything. I want to get the texture. I want. That's my dog. Yeah, and honestly, like I gagged. This was like 7 in the morning, so for me to have brisket this early, it was a big no for everything inside of my body. So I gagged that first time, so it wasn't an accurate read of what the brisket is like. But I'm gonna have this piece right now. Take a big bite, and this one I'm like, okay, I can taste it now. I'm good. My body's not rejecting it, and it was good. It was well seasoned. The texture is good. It's moist. It's flavorful. I was proud. It's a good cook. Yeah, the slice looks pretty yummy. Yummy, yummy, yummy. I would say that, so lessons learned from this cook is that ideally, if you have a warmer, I would recommend to rest in the warmer. I think maybe the Yeti, like, oopsie, y'all saw that? It was a little crunchy part, and that's okay, you know, it happens to the best of us. And also it could have been that I cut it like too thin, that I just like kind of messed up there, but still, you know, it's good stuff. As I was saying, yeah, ideally, for a better rested brisket, you would want to put it in a warmer. And another thing that's Topolino. Another thing from this cook that I learned is that I would want to start with less water for my water pan in the beginning of the cook. I would say maybe half of the amount that I did. That way I could render the fat even more. Yeah, just cut through the whole brisket. And here comes Mr. Jerby.
Yo, what's going on? I finally get to talk in the video. This brisket was tasting amazing. I think she killed it. We're also going to be doing some more brisket videos where we do like 44 Farms. Oh, there's a little Topolino. Oh, that's a little Topolino. And we're going to do 44 Farms versus Creekstone. We're going to do some other stuff. So keep on the lookout for that. And look at this bite. Like, that's 10 out of 10. That's 10 out of 10. Delicious. Sweet.